Hello.
Hey,
How are you?
good, good. I'm excited about our show
I
tonight.
know, I know. You have been asking for these guests to come back and share their perspective for a very, very long time. And I think as everything has unfolded lately in this country, I think it's the right time to have our guests back on
Oh yeah,
to
oh
share
yeah.
their perspective. Yeah.
I agree. Did you CNN had a police officer on last night, a man of color, who really, had a lot to say and how distressed he was about the perception of police now in this country.
Yeah.
I don't know if you caught that or not, but that's something to talk about.
Definitely. And the good thing I like is our guests tonight have done a very good job of intentionally connecting policing and the community and making positive interactions between both. And I think that's something that we have to talk more about with everything that's going on, that there are good law enforcement officers out there who are trying to change the narrative and
That's right.
trying to make sure that, the bad apples aren't, spoken about as much and want to share their way of making sure the community and the police have trust and positive engagements and could move this country forward in a positive way. So I'm very excited to hear
Yeah,
the
so
work
am
that
I.
they're doing. Yeah,
But the bottom line, Dania, is the bad apples aren't taken out of the equation.
yes,
It's never going to get better.
right.
They
Okay,
got to
so
go.
let's bring in our guests because I'm
Okay.
excited about
Okay.
today. So we have Ibn Bakari and Linz Brown. Obviously, they have joined our show before and shared some great perspective on law enforcement. So, we're going to give them an opportunity to share again tonight with everything that's going on in the country. But I really want to put a spotlight on the work that Ibn Bakari has been doing in the community and abroad. And he's the founder of Lights and Siren International. And his work has just been phenomenal within his community, and also just taking his efforts abroad and sharing how special law enforcement can be, not only in their community but in communities of need. So I'm going to give Ibn a chance to talk about his organization, but first I would like to share a video with our audience just to show them exactly what his initiatives are.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Ibn Hashim Bakari, and I am the founder and president of Lights and Sirens International. Lights and Sirens International started in 2010 with law enforcement agencies from New York, LA, Chicago, Dallas, New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and came together to support each other in basketball. We then saw the disparity in this country and wanted to see what we could do to help those less fortunate. So Lights and Sirens International over the last several years has been doing just that, helping those less fortunate both in Providence, Rhode Island, and also here in the Dominican Republic. Here today we have Alex Diaz of the Providence Police Department to share his experience with working with our nonprofit organization.
Yes, like David said, my name is Alex Diaz. I am a member of the Providence Police Department in Rhode Island, and we came in contact many years ago, and we've been supporting him under Lights and Sirens International for the past few years. This is our 4th year down in the Dominican Republic, and it's a tremendous event down here. Myself and the command staff are basically giving 100% support to him. And we do the same charity work down in Rhode Island all year round when it comes to turkey drives, Christmas event, holiday events, any occasion that we are willing to help it in this Lights and Sirens International. And like you said, this is our 4th year, and hopefully within the coming years, every year is bigger and bigger for us. And at the end of the day, it's just make sure we give a kid a smile and give him some future, some motivation that there is a way at the end of the long run.
Thank you for sharing that, Alex. Lights and Sirens' mission is geared towards education, sports, and cultural exposure. As a American Dominican and African American being able to come together, law enforcement is getting a very bad rap out there for bad apples out there that has brought negative attention. The last several years we have been working to try to bridge that gap to show that not everyone is trying to hurt. We want to continue to do the work to help inspire children in the community by providing them the essential things that they need. Education, backpacks, school supplies, toys. And we really just hope that you will consider supporting our nonprofit organization, Vacation with a Purpose.
Well, that was excellent. That was really excellent. And like I said, we don't always get a chance to see the positive side of law enforcement and the community engagement. And I, want to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit more about why this is so important to you.
Well, thank you so much, Dania and Donna, for having us on this program again. And I think the video speaks for itself, the importance of what Lights and Sirens International is doing. Here, actually, Lindsay has been to the Dominican Republic and has been a part of what we are doing and what we're trying to initiate in this country. And the importance of it is just that, looking at what's taking place in our country right now. And even though it has not yet happened here in Rhode Island, I have reminded the governor and I reminded the command staff that we're only one incident away from making national news. Mm-hmm. And it's sad to say that, but it is so true. So while we're trying to stay proactive versus reactive to what's taking place in our country, we're addressing all of the topics of what applies to every human being. When you talk about ego, that's something that applies to every person. I don't care if you're white, black, green, or blue. I don't care if you're a woman or male. Everybody has an ego, and sometimes our egos can mislead us. Accountability. Accountability is something that I really find that we are living in a society that we blame everybody else for not taking accountability for sometimes of our own stupidity. Mm-hmm. And I think that is then where was causing a lot more of the conflict. Yes, there's racial tension in this country, which has never been addressed. And so therefore, until it's addressed, that's when we will finally see a change. So all I'm trying to do is simply just bring two sides of the equation to the table to have a discussion and talk out what are the differences. Because I have, through my 47 years, all arguments that I have had in my lifetime never end well. Mm-hmm. But when you do have discussions, right, now you start to break down the barriers and you start to look and make changes. So I'm very passionate about this. It's become very frustrating work, but it is work that my heart and soul will not allow me to just not do something. Because I've been in way too many conversations where you're talking about it but doing nothing. Right. And now it's time to step up and do something.
Well, that's excellent. That's excellent. I'm going to give you an opportunity to introduce our two guests. Eric is on. I'm going to add him now. And I think, Ibn, you'd be the best one to introduce them and also talk about why their perspective is so important to this conversation as well.
Absolutely. So we have my man here, Eric Moore, who is a retired law enforcement officer with the LAPD out in California. And next month would actually, say
Eric.
hello, Eric.
Hey, Eric.
Hello. And, next month will mark 21 years that me and Eric first met in Indianapolis. Mm-hmm. And Lindsay here is my brother from next door, right in Connecticut, Rhode Island, is a retired Connecticut State Trooper. And I believe August would make 21 years that you and I had met each other. So there's a 21-year brotherhood relationship that is here with two individuals that have dedicated their lives and put their lives on the line to law enforcement and was able to see the end of the tunnel. But it also came with a lot of issues with the systemic racism that they had to deal with in their own departments. Mm-hmm. So I feel that it's fitting that you have these two African-American males that are just that, African-American males, that chose to get in law enforcement to try to help change the trajectory and the image of law enforcement. So, Eric, if you could please share with Dania and Donna, and also myself and Lindsay, your experience.
Well, my experience is a little unique in that I grew up in a home with a lot of criminal activity. My father was involved in narcotics. My mother was as well. And pretty much a large portion of my family was involved in criminal enterprises. So it gave me a unique perspective in that I understand that sometimes, what people don't understand, just like there's a person on both sides of the badge, there's also a person on the other side of the badge who may be perceived as a suspect, but we have to be empathetic regardless of, we can't judge. We have to go in with an open slate. And my unique perspective growing up on both sides of, having parents that were criminals and then, and then having the opportunity to work in law enforcement, I had a vastly different perspective. Right. Within my department, what was really powerful for me was the opportunity to reach out and share my story where other officers were able to understand it's not where you start, it's where you ascend to.
Very nice. Very good. Very good. I find that very interesting that your perspective growing up in a home with criminal activities, as you said, your approach to policing was a lot different, I'm sure. And it's because of what you experienced, growing up. And that's the question for me to you, Eric. I think police officers bring their experiences to the job. My question is there a way for police to be impartial? Is there any way that they can do their jobs without some of the things that they've experienced, whether it's in their, growing up in their childhood, or their prejudices or their biases, or even their experience on the job? Can we get police officers to be impartial and just do their job without, because I think that's what the problem is. Some of them are bringing things to their job that are not healthy or helpful when it comes to policing. So I'm asking you, because you have had a lot to probably, dissect, how can police officers be impartial and do their job?
Absolutely. And I think the part that's important, again, even framed our relationship, we started out playing basketball. But one of the greatest things that ever happened to me, I took a contract, I played over in Ecuador. But before I started playing, they immersed me with a family. They let me spend a month with a family in Ecuador to, kind of be culturally immersed so I could have a better understanding of their culture. And I can't tell you how important that was. In some areas, what they do with certain officers, especially if they aren't from more of an urban background, they have them go and have Sunday dinner with a couple of families where they can start to have that contact and understand that Big Mama is a mother. And that little Pookie is a child who has dreams and aspirations. And, so a lot of those barriers for me, even moving into a culture absolutely different than mine, but living with a family, and I'm not saying that we should have officers stay for an entire month, but there should definitely be required interaction outside of crisis. I think that, to piggyback on what had been said, it's a difference in a dialogue and an argument. A lot of times when police are involved, it's a stressful, confrontive, combative situation. I think midnight basketball in LA was a huge thing. We played at the beach. People got a chance to see officers play basketball, interact with the kids, recruit them for employment opportunities. And I think our image was much better. Unfortunately, a lot of those programs are personality driven. It depends on, is that a priority for that particular chief? And you see those programs come and go, but invariably, the absence of those leads to a disconnect with the community.
Oh, so one thing we keep talking about is we say the word law enforcement. Is that actually the right word we should be using any longer? Because what you're talking about is building bridges. And do we need to maybe step away from a little bit about calling police officers law enforcement agents more than community builders? I don't know. I think that there's already a negative connotation on there. Police officers, law enforcement, versus what you're talking about is, community interaction and building bridges with what you were doing in LA. I like that.
Well, as far as, I haven't given enough time to really focus on the terminology or the perception of the terminology, but I do think that it is important that there is a line, because without that line, then certain things, like if you break the law, and when I say break the law, you are involved in activity that's unlawful. I think that there should be I'm not, even though I'm officer friendly, at the end of the day, I took an oath to enforce the laws that were agreed upon, voted upon. And I think that absent that, I think you see, and here's one of the things I'm going to discuss. I'm from the south side of Chicago. And right now in the south side of Chicago, we are facing a crisis because, quote unquote, law enforcement is afraid to enforce the law. And the bigger problem with that is, just yesterday, one of the people from my alma mater, a young lady who's headed to college, was shot in the ear because law enforcement has now not become law enforcement. They're not as proactive, and now what they've done is more kind of what you were describing. They simply ride around and take a report after somebody's hurt, and I don't think we should reduce law enforcement to that standard.
Great perspective. And that's one thing about Donna and I. We learn a lot. We think we know it all coming into these conversations.
What do you mean we know it all?
Great perspective. But that's very true. And a perspective that Lynn shared the first time we had this conversation was that police officers are human, and they go through traumatic situations sometimes on a daily basis. So there needs to be a lot more resources to help them deal with those situations. So that way they're not carrying that trauma around while they're doing their job. And Liz, I want to give you an opportunity to remind our audience about you and your background, and also discuss some of the work that you've done with Lights and Sirens International.
Thanks again for having me. Donna, you're a treat, as always. And Brother Moore, thanks. Pleasure to meet you today. Glad to have you on.
Likewise.
I'm always big into networking. Ibn knows this about me. My story is simple. From Hartford, Connecticut, born and raised. And I'd like to pat you on the back, for lack of a better term, Eric, because personally, when I think of people and brothers and sisters that grow up in that kind of environment, to come out of it and do what you did for the length of time you did in your career, I think that's an innate feeling and emotion and spirit that people like you have to deal with such trauma at a young age and grow up and move beyond it and learn how to deal with those stresses and all the negative things that go around that come with living in that type of environment, to move through that and still become successful. And there are a lot of Eric Moores running around here that we don't give enough credit to. Amen. But my personal thought on that is it's innate. That's something that you could have gone one way or another, but something in you, that innate thing took you to a successful career in the LA Police Department. So I'd like to.
Well, my grandmother took me to church.
And I know about those fans, so I knew what was happening with those fans if you got out of line. But my experience with Ibn came back a while ago, and we met the same way playing basketball. We were actually training to go to Spain, I believe it was, for the International Law Enforcement Olympics back in the days. So that's how he and I met. And then a few years later, he says, "Hey, listen, I got this nonprofit I'm putting together, Lights and Sirens International. We're going to be trying to work to bridge gaps between law enforcement and people in the community. We understand there's, and Ibn says this all the time, there's a disparity with the relationship between law enforcement and members of their community." I myself have always been big on that. I've always said that my career in law enforcement gave me the opportunity to serve my community. So and Eric, you know this. Sometimes you, as a police officer, you can feel used. out there on patrol. But I flipped that for my own internal purposes, was to give back to my community. And I said this before, and I'll say it now as while I'm retired, because I said it while I was working. I wanted to help people and lock up assholes. That's what my goal was. Right? Because there is a law enforcement need in our communities, in our neighborhoods. And Donna, to answer your question about should we change the name that law enforcement to something else? No, I don't think we should. I think law enforcement is the career field. Police officer is the person. There is a difference. There is a big difference between law enforcement and police officer. Police officer is the person out there serving your community. That police officer should come into that field with a burning desire to help people, with a burning desire to put his integrity and his passion and enthusiasm on display for his community. His passion to get to know his community should be evident from day one of the process, and it should continue throughout his career. Although you will have those ups and downs and those bumps along the way throughout your career, you still have to find it within you to maintain your demeanor, to maintain your professionalism and respect for yourself, respect for your community, and above all, your integrity as a police officer, because you do not just represent yourself, you represent your community. When you put that uniform on, wherever it may be from, you represent that department. So your actions, good and bad, will reflect on that department and as well as your community. Because Eric and Ibn both know, when you travel outside of your state and outside of your police department, you go to other police departments, and the way you carry yourself, we're all looking at one another like, how's this guy gonna act? And when we all get into those rooms and those phone calls, like, hey, did you see that guy? You see that girl? You know, they were acting out of line. What are they teaching those people over there? You know, so that travels, that word travels, that negative connotation, that negative attitude for one department, from one department to another, is evidenced by the people that wear that uniform. So if they don't come into that career field with an attitude of wanting to help people, wanting to do good in the community, and take an active role in that, and not just walk up and down the street, and drive up and down the street and around the corner, but get out of the vehicles, walk into the business owners' stores, talk to the business owner. You see the kids out in parks playing, get out the car and play with them. You know, you see people sitting on the porch, get out the car, walk up to them, say, "Hey, how you doing?" Strike up conversations. Because many police officers who look like me come from environments like mine and Eric's, right? We are pretty much a community within law enforcement, because I haven't talked to very few who look like me, men and women, who haven't come from a similar type neighborhood. So we understand each other, but it takes us to infiltrate our communities as a collective group in order to make a big difference.
So you brought up a really good point when you said, you know, for instance, and I hate to say this, but Los Angeles. Do you know what I instantly thought of when I said, "Oh, he's from Los Angeles"? What's the famous thing that happened?
The riots. Right.
And who else? Probably the first case.
O.J. Simpson.
And who else?
Simpson.
Yes, and who else?
Rodney King.
Right there. Right. And when I hear the word Minneapolis, I'm never going to think anything differently other than Chauvin. Right. So what I'm saying is that you're right. We started attaching. You said South Side of Chicago. You know, I mean, we start having stereotypes and images about communities and about police officers and law enforcement, and you know, and these are hard things to change. So I would like to know all of your opinions about what is the state of our law enforcement across our country since the Chauvin trial has ended. What do you think?
I think you're.
No, you go ahead, because I know you got a basketball game you got to deal with.
Well, one of the things that I've immediately seen is after the verdict, and just the attention that has been escalating toward law enforcement and the practices, I think it's a good thing. I mean, it's unfortunate that a lot of times the catalyst is some catastrophic scenario, but people are now paying attention and they are more interested. Just like the last election, it was galvanized and people are getting involved and paying attention. Well, I think one of the great things about the Chauvin verdict is that it shows that there is accountability and that you will have to answer for your actions. And I think that, just the same way when we set up a location where there's a lot of traffic accidents and, you write a ticket over there. Well, you're not writing that ticket just to that one person. The other motorists see that person getting a ticket and they go, it's not a good idea for me to speed near this school.
Okay.
By the same standard, that transfer discipline works when an officer is held accountable. He does something wrong. The other officers see, hey, this is not okay. And I believe it has a great purpose. And also, it also alerts to Ibn's scenario where he's talking to the superior saying, hey, wake up, pay attention. We're one incident away from this being us. Now the brass or the supervisors or the decision makers have to be a little bit more responsive because they see this is a reality.
Right.
We can end up paying a lot of money. And it's so I think it's one of the things that immediately has happened with LAPD is they've started to hire more minorities. For a long time in our academy classes, there was a gross underrepresentation of minorities. Mm-hmm. So in this latest class, one of my friends, a lieutenant there, he told me the class was almost 50% minority, which is a huge scenario. I think if there's more diversity in the divisions or in the units or the precincts, there is an elevated level of community and officers. And I'm going to say something that's real clear. In most scenarios, if you've got diversity in the car, nobody's going to pick on one group or another because you might be picking on that person's group.
Okay.
Great point.
I like that. And so it's 50% in LA, but what is the population? What is the general population?
No, and I'm just saying the police department, our deployment now is I think African Americans make up about 12% of LA. And I think the department is really pretty almost aligned with that number.
Okay.
But for a long time, it was really diminishing. After affirmative action went away, the incentive to really keep reasonable levels of diversity really kind of went away. But again, every time we get away from understanding the value of diversity, we're taught a severe lesson. You need to have a good amount because here's the thing, and Ibn and Lindsay, I'm sure you can relate to this. There have been times when I'm the only Black person on the ship. So how much of a voice do I really have? Where if there's 4 other African Americans or 4 other minorities, then we feel a little bit more empowered to speak out on things that need to be adjusted. But nobody wants to be on an island by themselves where, you may need backup and nobody's coming. So I think the cornerstone in changing this dynamic is really to have diverse deployment. That right in and of itself inherently will reduce a lot of the excessive force and racism.
Now, because of the conviction of former Officer Chauvin, a lot of the critiques are saying, a lot of the police officers are saying that the recruitment is going to diminish because officers are going to, not want to join that force because of, so much scrutiny or so much, just so many things that they feel is unnecessary. Do you think more minority young people will join the force now to provide more of a diversity within the police force, so that way communities can see someone that looks like them, and these police officers can relate to their community because now they know what it's like to be in their shoes and involved in some of the things that they're involved with. So my question to you is, do you think it's false to say that recruitment will diminish because of the conviction, or are you confident that more minorities will enlist into the police force and make it a lot more diverse?
I think it really depends on the goals of that department. There's always a justification for years. There's always a justification when, like I worked at the police academy and I would, do a check and say, hey, does this look diverse? And if it wasn't, then I would ask questions. And then sometimes I get the justification, oh, well, we don't have enough applicants that want to apply, or there aren't too many Black folks have this issue, they have a credit issue, or that. There's always justifications, but there's also there's ways to ensure that you have aggressive recruitment and that you make people feel welcome. I think in a lot of scenarios, minorities are not really encouraged or supported to join the department. It's a good job. It has a pension. In most scenarios, there's ample compensation. And if we're honest, almost like the fire department, sometimes there's a perception those are white jobs. Those are good jobs. Those are white jobs. Let's keep them white. And that is a miss. You know, that is something we can't allow. I've made a very good career out of this. I encourage other people to understand. But if we keep it a secret or we pretend that there isn't, like the fire departments, that's a good job. Well-paying police department. But a lot of times, what do you hear? Oh, they can't pass the credit, or this, that, and the other. There's those silly justifications that aren't valid. And simply, almost like voter registration, a false barrier to dissuade Black folks or minorities from participating.
Yeah, we call that systemic racism. So, Linz, I know you have done some recruitment yourself. You have been intentional about, talking to the youth about the opportunities to go into law enforcement. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And my take on recruitment is number one, there's a couple different elements I want to address. First, we have to look at ourselves as Black people, Hispanics. Have to look at ourselves and get past years and years and years of stigma that brainwashed into believing that it wasn't a career field that we were needed at. We weren't wanted there. And if you got there, you got picked on, you got ridiculed, you got rode hard. You experienced bosses who never cut you a break, but would cut everybody else a break. They made it hard for you. You know, the old, just like we all know, we got to work 2 and 3 times as harder to be average.
Amen.
Right? While they only have to work half average to be above average. Right? So we have to get past that. We have to figure out within ourselves how we get past that. All right. Once we figure that out, we can start recruiting directly into our community. And I was big on the Explore program. I started the first state police Explore program in the city of Hartford. When I left that program in 2010, it hasn't been picked up since. As a matter of fact, this past weekend, I went into my garage and I still have my Explorer uniforms and badges and things that I'll be passing along to one of my old bosses who's still working this week. I was not able to convince any of the community resource officers to take over that program. It's a lot of work. It's hard work. But from that program, I got 4 state troopers out of it and 3 local police officers out of it. Right. And that's over a period of 10 years. And that was me by myself trying to keep these kids encouraged. Now, imagine if we had a hell of a lot more people that look like me pushing Explore programs that start at 14 years of age, because you really have to start that young, because 14 is when our kids really start getting up into the community and start experiencing a lot of things they shouldn't be experienced in. So we got to cut that off right there. So we got to get those kids involved in these programs and talk law enforcement up. Like Brother Moore said, it's a great job. It really is a great job. You're going to get a great pension. It's one of the only professions left in the country that still allows you for a pension. So you got to take advantage of that. Recruitment in our communities is scarce. And like Brother Moore said, even when you make it through the process, when they get to that selections board, they're going to say, oh, you got a bad credit, or he smoked weed when he was 15. He's 29. What are you talking about?
Wow.
I mean, there's always a reason. Meanwhile, nepotism is running wild with 4 generations running through departments, right? And they keep it to themselves. They recruit themselves. Hey, listen, my cousin wants to be a cop. I'll co-sign for him. We're not co-signing for one another at that level. Right? We're not co-signing for one another. We're not building each other up. We're not recruiting enough of us. Mm-hmm. There aren't enough of us talking to each other, trying to have these conversations with people in our community about the job. We're afraid to. I used to do recruiting drives for my Explore programs at all high schools in the city of Hartford. In particular high school, my alma mater, I had 31 kids sign up for the program. I had an open house, food, everything. I had a good presentation set up for them. Not one of them showed up. And this is after I talked to each one of their parents and sent them all letters, and they all agreed that they would be there. Not one of them showed up. And for years, I'm trying to figure out why couldn't I get these kids to show up to this program? Well, I talked to one of the principals. He said, well, it's on the south end of Hartford. Our kids don't want to go over to the south end of Hartford because it's the south end. Can you start one here at the school? I talked to the bosses at the troop. We don't have the resources to do that.
Right.
Now, mind you, they had their own school's resource officer. They had their own Explore program. They didn't have a state police Explore program. That's what they wanted. I can only stretch so far. So my whole thing is teaching these kids the discipline it takes to be a police officer, the bearing it takes to be a police officer, the courage to be a police officer, and the integrity, right? Because a lot of these shootings and all this nonsense going on, for me, in my mind, is three things: discipline, training, training, and integrity. If you don't have those things, you're gonna go out and make mistakes.
Right.
You can't be afraid to go out and do the job that you chose to do. You're gonna get hurt. You might get into a scuffle and end up with a broken finger or a scrape on a lip or something, but you didn't kill anybody and nobody killed you.
Right.
You handled the situation. When I came on the job early in '97, you could get into a scuffle. We had a force continuum when it came to the use of force. We had a force continuum. You couldn't just go out and be reactive to whatever the situation was. You had a step-by-step program. You had to show that you used every step of the way in order before you even got to deadly force, right? But over the years, that as people became more and more violent, at least that's what the propaganda machine made everybody believe, right? Law enforcement changed and went from, okay, you can't talk them down, so now shoot them.
Wow.
Right. So there's been a big shift in law enforcement when responding to incidents that might require physical use of force. But in some law enforcement agencies, though, that piece has been elevated to a level that it shouldn't necessarily be. I think I digressed a little bit. So let me get back on track here.
No, great points.
to recruitment. But recruiting, we used to have a brother that you went to all of the HBCUs on the East Coast to recruit. That's what his thing was. Once a year, he hit up all of the schools. My academy, we had 7 black males in the academy, no black females. Since that time, there has never been that many black people in the academy, never. And over the years, that number has gone lower and lower and lower. And the only reason we made 7, and before me, there were classes where there were more, was because there was a consent decree, a federal consent decree that forced the state to recruit more minorities because they were being sued by an organization within the state. A lot of police departments around this country are under those consent decrees right now. We just don't know about them, right? Ours expired some years ago, and since then, the numbers fell short. I know a guy that was in the academy, and he was having a hard time with some of the classes. Myself and another group of brothers, we got together with him and said, hey, you come to my house on Sunday, we'll sit down, we'll study up, we'll get you where you need to be. They talked this guy into quitting and said, hey, why don't you go to a community college, take a basic writing class, and then come back. And he left the academy. They talked him out of it. They talked him into leaving. They made him feel like he wasn't smart enough to be there. He was more than smart enough to be there. He's doing very well in life now. There's no reason why he wouldn't have been doing well in the job. You know, so they will talk you out of it. They'll make you think that you're not smart enough, and then you're out. And now they move on to the next one.
Right.
Right. So throughout the process, they chip away until they get down to the number that they're comfortable with and say, okay, there you go. But again, if we start en masse recruiting youngsters, and everybody talks about how do you change law enforcement? You change it from within.
Right.
How did J. Edgar Hoover destroy all of our organizations?
Mm-hmm.
He didn't do it from the outside. He did it from within. That's a battle technique that's undefeated, right? You want to destroy an organization, infiltrate it from within, and you take it down. So
Yeah.
if we want to take down this racist display
Right.
that is not, in my view, dominant amongst law enforcement culture, I don't believe that for 1 second. But I do believe that if you look like me and you walk in a room and you know your stuff, and they know you know your stuff, and they know what you will and will not tolerate, you won't have any problems. As a matter of fact, when you show up to the scene, they know not to cross certain lines with you. Anytime you walk into a room, anytime you walk into a scene, whatever was going on before you got there,
It's gonna
it's
stop.
inappropriate. It will stop.
Mhm.
So if we recruit enough, and they don't have to be black or Hispanic. They can be white. Because I know some white brothers on the job that the brothers don't even crack jokes amongst each other around these dudes because they're like, listen, I don't want to hear that. You know what I mean? From anybody, about anyone.
Right.
You know. So if you walk with dignity, respect, with integrity, if you let them know right away what you're about and that you will not tolerate certain behaviors, and they don't have to be racial. They could be, you could be just, taking money, taking drugs, committing crimes, committing other crimes on a job in front of other people because they're out there, they do it. But if you got a partner that's going to go along with you, then you already know, and they'll test you to see which ones they can poke the bear at and see how much they'll get by on. And as soon as you give them an out, as soon as you give them a reason to think that, yeah, I got him now, he let me get away with that. Now he's in it with me. I'm good. It only takes one time to do that, and then you're caught. Now you got a dilemma because, like Brother Moore was saying earlier, now you got to worry about whether your backup's coming, right? Now you got to worry about somebody helping you when you need help. Personally, I never cared. I know I joined the Marine Corps because I knew I could die, and I was all for it because I joined for my own personal reasons. I knew why I joined the Marine Corps, and I knew why I joined the state police. I knew what the risks are. I knew I could lose my life doing both. I was willing to accept that risk. Mm. So if you come into law enforcement and you're not willing to accept that you could get hurt and or killed, it's not the job for you.
Right. Interesting. I find it very interesting just listening. And every time like I said, I have these conversations, I learn something new. There's just a lot of barriers. I think just listening to you and Eric about the recruitment piece and the sustainability and just the opportunities and the way they make it difficult sometimes for the minorities to become part of that, the whole system. It's baffling to me how that sort of, and I call it systemic racism, also exists within the police force. I mean, obviously you assume so, but to hear you guys firsthand say some of the hurdles and challenges that people that look like you and I are having to become part of that organization for the sake of changing, for the sake of making it better. It's a lot. It's a lot to get through. Now I want to turn to Ibn because I need some positivity right now. I need to know if you had a chance to give your blueprint of what you do within your organization to help the relationships between the community and police officers, what would that blueprint be? What would each city or organization have to look like? What are some of the things that you've done in Providence? And tell us some good stories. Tell us some great engagement, some eye-opening, tear-jerking moments where the connection was made and the children that you guys service looked at these officers and the officers looked at these children and there was a connection of I'm going to protect you and I'm going to be there for you. Like, give us some positive stuff about what you're doing, because I think it's just phenomenal.
Well, first I have to say that these two gentlemen really kind of like gave you what the blueprint is that I took. Mm-hmm. See, growing up in Detroit, Michigan, I had that luxury of growing up and not feeling that feeling of being a minority because I was a part of the majority. Right. But there was still that level of violence that was there that I had to grow up in, similar to Eric in Southside Chicago. So my blueprint essentially has been taking folks in, as growing up, there was this, they called them the Big Four. The Big Four was 4 white officers that drove into black neighborhoods, and they would cause havoc. They was coming, cracking heads and doing everything, and you knew when they show up, you knew what was going to happen. So therefore, it was that it was like, okay, you started seeing more and more minorities that started integrating into the department and then changing the perception of it. Where I grew up, where there was black police chief. So now it's like, okay, you had black fire chief, you had a black mayor. So now you had these decision makers that were all about that recruitment process, making sure that the officers represented the communities which they was going to be in. Now, on the positive side of that, I sat down with the brass here in Rhode Island and convinced them that going to the Dominican Republic is going to do a lot of good for the officers that are working in this community, because this is the second largest population out of New York of Dominicans.
In Rhode Island.
In Rhode Island.
Right.
So coming to the Dominican Republic was giving officers the opportunity to go into the community, similar to what Eric mentioned about going and playing professional basketball, integrating and being with that El Sorority family for that month, helped him to better understand the culture. And so now when you understand the culture, you come back to your environment, and now you have that run-in with that Dominican citizen. And now you talk about, oh, I was in your country, but no, I wasn't in Punta Cana. I wasn't in Casa de Campo. I was actually like in your barrio in Santiago, in Santo Domingo, the capital, in Puerto Plata, in Saussure. So now that changed the conversation, and now that person did not have that that anxiety of like, I have this officer that's here. You know, when Lindsay mentioned, like, you know, get out of your car and go and speak to the people in the community. See, most folks have that image of when the police show up, there's a problem.
Right.
And we need to change that. It's not always about a problem. You know, so you want to hear a story. The story is this story would be in November 2020 during the pandemic. My partnership with a local nonprofit organization called Esperanza Hope have partnered together and came together, and we decided that we were going to give close to 700 turkeys to the community. We also turned around and ended up giving 700 food baskets and also hand sanitizer. We went on the radio station and said, this is what we're going to do. And we went right up in the hood in the cut. Now, I also took it upon myself to reach out to the U.S. Marshals, the Rhode Island State Police, the local PD, and we had all members of branches that were there with us, including Black Lives Matter. And I also had my out-of-town brother, Lindsay, who attended that event as well. And we were able to hand out everything in that community without a hitch, without an issue. And there was not one news crew that was there to show that positive image of what we were able to accomplish. So now at the end of this, we all are like now congregated together and taking a group photo. And in that, now we take that group photo. And then it dawned on me as we were taking that photo, and I was having this tear-jerking moment of like this proud feeling of like, wow, we were able to come and do this and come together as a community, law enforcement in the community, no politicians or anybody involved. We came together and we were able to show that it can be done. But usually when you see federal, state, and local agencies coming together, it's usually for only two reasons. It's usually a major investigation, or it's a funeral for a dignitary or somebody of importance.
Mm.
But we weren't there for neither one of those. We were there to help give back to the community. And to me, that really set the tone and let me know that we're doing great work. And we now just need to start getting the attention of our government officials, because they also need to be held accountable, because they're the ones who are setting their agendas and their policies. They also need to be held accountable. Just like every citizen needs to be accountable for their actions. And as we all start being accountable for ourselves, when we start looking in the mirror and look at ourselves, then we can start to make change.
Right. Well, you know, I believe that's true, that we have to be accountable. We have to be accountable for ourselves. But what I like right now is that we're holding others. The others have to be accountable also. So today, yesterday, a young Black woman, teenager, 16-year-old in near our community, was found dead. And, you know, it was been very quiet. And people are holding that community now accountable. We want to know what happened to her.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I like. I mean, of course, I don't want the young woman to be hurt, but we're holding people accountable now everywhere. That's what's happening for me. Do you think that's true?
Absolutely. I would say, and that's the reason why with our programming, we choose the topics that affect everyone. We all profile. I get profiled every single day. Are you a basketball player? That's profiling me, you know? And I tell folks, no, I was a student athlete, because it took me to be a student to get those grades in order for me to play the ball.
Mm-hmm.
But the ball was helping me to be in school, to get that education. Mm-hmm. You know, we also have implicit biases. Yeah. We all have implicit biases. And so now it's about trying to know what is our implicit biases, so that now we become better individuals, so that now when we are going to hold ourselves accountable, we can also hold others accountable.
So you're 3 law enforcement people that used to carry weapons. And I just have a question for you, because I have never held a gun, and well, really, I haven't never held a gun in my hand. So I can't tell you this, but I would just like to know, would you mistake a taser for a gun? I'm sorry. I'm going to put you on the spot.
Whoa. Go ahead. Go ahead. You guys tackle that.
Go ahead, Eric.
You know what? I'd never second guess another officer unless I'm there in prison.
I'm not asking you that. I'm not asking you. I just want to know if you.
Let me say this. Our taser was a lot different. It wasn't even on our belt at the time. We had to call a sergeant to bring a taser. So that wasn't, and I hate to date myself like that, but we used to have a code. It was, well, I shouldn't say what the code was, but when we needed a taser, one had to be brought to the location, or you checked one out and it was in the trunk of your car somewhere, but it wasn't even on your belt. So that's not a question I could fairly answer.
Okay. All right. Next.
Okay. By the time that I retired, they had started to, in the last 3 years of my career, they had started issuing tasers to everyone in the department. I didn't want one. I didn't feel I needed one.
Okay.
Having seen them, and I tell you why I didn't want one. I always felt throughout my entire career that if I couldn't talk you down, if I couldn't talk you into a situation that was safe and amicable for everybody, even when arresting you, and if I couldn't utilize the tools of my belts, if I couldn't verbalize, if pepper spray didn't work, if my baton didn't work, and the only thing left was deadly force, then I failed at the first 3. And if I got to get to deadly force, it's only because I'm in threat or someone else is in threat of imminent deadly force. So if I get it, it's a toss-up: pepper spray, taser, baton. I don't know which one do you use, right? Taser, pepper spray, baton. I mean, verbal skills. If those four, if you can't get it done in those four, unless you are an imminent threat, you shouldn't be using deadly force anyway. That goes to what I was saying earlier about, okay, you might get scraped up a little bit, but then that goes into another category of, well, I feared for my life, which is the go-to in police officer cases where there's a defense. I feared for my life, which is a law. I believe it's Tennessee Garner, brother. More, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it was Tennessee Garner that kind of promotes that defense. I feared for my life, because when you go to court, all you have to do is say, I feared for my life.
Mm.
There lies your defense for using deadly force.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that's been the go-to for a lot of police officers who use that as a defense when they do elevate to deadly force. I never carried a taser. I've seen them. I've held in my hand. I've played around with them because I still had to go to training for them. I just never carried one. I could not, myself, having been trained in weaponry, I could not mistake a taser for a firearm, a handgun.
Okay. But I do believe people make mistakes. So I'm just asking for opinions. I believe people make mistakes.
Yeah. If I can touch on that real quick, because I've been asked that question too. If you spent most of your career in administrative roles, and if you don't train with your weaponry, you're going to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if you train with that taser once a year, or you train with that firearm once a year, and you never go to the range again, the only time you ever touch it is when you put it on your belt to go to work, you're going to make a mistake when you need to use one or the other. It's reasonable, in my eyes, to make a mistake. Now, I'm not justifying anything.
Right.
Because you still know the difference in weight and color. My daughter said to me one day, Daddy, how could you mistake it? It's bright yellow. When you hold it, when you point it at the person, you can see it's yellow.
Right.
I agree, but I was actually surprised that my daughter had the forethought to even think of that. Think at that.
And some of the comments that we're getting as you guys are speaking is Black officers are not making those type of mistakes. Chris Jones says that. And Chris Jones also says officers arrest mass murderers without incident, but kill unarmed Black men. How is that?
That's an easy question. And Brother Moore will probably agree. We're not as afraid.
Mm.
We're not afraid.
Right.
Because our life experiences is damn near hell for a lot of us anyway.
Right.
In the communities we grow up in.
If I could,
yeah.
I could say this.
Go ahead.
If I could say this before I have to run off because my team is about to tip off. But again, there is a certain level, we're often made as African Americans, a lot of times, oh, you don't have the background, or, this person has more of an academic background, this, that, and the other. Well, the irony of it is that to be a really good officer, a lot of times your urban education is probably more important than your formal education.
That's true.
And
absolutely.
And to Officer Brown's point, I've been in a fight before. A fight doesn't scare me.
Right.
Some people, a lot of folks that we are dealing with that are out there, firstly, it would be the equivalent of if I take a guy from Skid Row and I ask him to walk into a boardroom, how comfortable is he going to be?
Right.
Well, if I take a guy from a very homogeneous, affluent background and I drop him in on the south side of Chicago or South Central, how impactful? There's a learning curve.
Correct.
Although, because of arrogance, a lot of times you have officers that are from these backgrounds that think, well, I scored 1,700 on this, and I know, and my cousin was a law enforcement. Have you ever been punched in the face? Have you ever rolled around and tussled?
Down to that street smart.
Right.
And and can you read and can you make an urban assessment under duress where you know if somebody's talking or if they're really about to make a move? That is not taught in the academy. That's a life experience. And although, and unfortunately the arrogance of a lot of folks, and it leads them to be, overcompensate when they're in a circumstances where people are just talking loud. They don't really look like them. They are, they are alarmed at the onset, and that's a very dangerous combination. So that is probably why. And then if the other piece is, let's just be honest, the numbers. There aren't that many Black officers to have these mistakes because we're excluded.
Very true.
So I apologize. I've got to run.
Good luck.
Hey, good luck with your game.
Hey,
thanks for joining us.
Hey, yeah, you guys pull for Inglewood. We're going to win today.
Okay.
Pleasure meeting you.
Real quickly, if I could just say this, it was an honor to participate, and I hope my contribution had some value.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good luck.
Take care.
All right.
Get the
Last
win.
question. I know we're up on the hour. So last question for you, Linz, and maybe you too, Ibn. Justice and Policing Act. What are your thoughts about that? I think legislation is very important as we talk about so many other things that we have got to add into the equation in order to eradicate the racism in the department. But what do you think about the Justice and Policing Act, and what about it are you in favor the most? Which segment of it?
I'll start, I guess. I'm not familiar with that. I haven't done much research on it. So if you could elaborate on what some of the segments are in it.
Okay, so the Justice and Policing Act says it holds police accountable in our courts to improve transparency into policing by collecting better and more accurate data of police misconduct and use of force, reform police training and practices, and make lynching a federal crime.
Yeah. There's no downfall to any of that, right? But here's the thing. It's what cops hate most: change.
Right.
Right. It's what that culture hates the most: change. We like things the way they were.
Right.
In Connecticut, they just passed a law that is going to diminish qualified immunity.
Right.
And a lot of and create a lot of other laws similar to the federal law there. Some of my police officer friends are upset about it. Some of them are okay with it. And I'm like, well, I'm going to lose my house. Yeah. Right. If you're doing your job, you're not going to have a problem with it. If you're not using excessive force and being unprofessional and going outside of your training, you're going to be fine. So it shouldn't be a big issue. But law enforcement doesn't want to change the way they do things. That's letting the cat out the bag. The gig is up. Yes. All right. Now you got guys saying, the guys are retiring left and right. Good. Good riddance. Oh, wait, recruitment's low. Right. Recruitment's only low amongst the cops that want to go out and do dirt. They just want the badge. They want the power. They want to go out and do dirt. So if recruiting's low and those are the types of people that aren't being hired, so be it.
Right.
But again, going back to our early talk about recruiting, it's incumbent upon us to recruit within ourselves. Right. And we need a massive push starting at an early age, pushing through law enforcement programs, PAL programs to push through. But the biggest fear there is the change of what they've been doing for so many years. And now not being able to get away with it and being held accountable to it.
Well, I definitely appreciate the transparency and the ability to talk on these issues freely. And I know, Ibn, you talked about the gag order that was placed on some of the police officers. So I want you to talk about that. But do you have anything else to add?
Well, I would double down. I totally agree with what Lindsay just stated. And I would add to that, and me and Lindsay talked about this, is that there should be evaluations done with officers on a regular basis because of the different things that they're experiencing, like their psychologicals. Yes, a psychological exam happens with you when you go through the recruiting process. But then once you make yourself on the job, unless there's an incident that takes place, is the only time that you may be asked to do it, but it may not be mandatory. So I think that, they should be looking at doing an evaluation, probably every 3 to 5 years, just to see where the individual is mentally, because again, there is a lot of trauma. Yes. And you're talking about mental health issues among law enforcement that is out there that's not talked about.
Correct.
Well, one of the points that Officer Chauvin after he committed this very heinous crime, and we can call it a crime now, he was very nonchalant about it. You know, he went about his business, and he was talking to one of the witnesses, and calm, cool, like nothing had ever happened. So to me, you know, if you've taken someone's life and you can just walk down the street and get in your car and drive away and not even think about it, there's something's missing there in that fellow.
Definitely a light bulb is missing, and obviously we don't know what is there. I mean, I think we all have different traumas that happens in our lives that remains with us. But again, it's not something that you can use as an excuse. You still have to be held. You still have to be held. You have to be held accountable because of the bad choice and decision that you made, despite what might be going on up here in your head.
And that was my my initial thought of impartiality. Like, can a police officer do their job without so many other things that they're carrying to a situation? You know, I just don't know if that is possible, because obviously they're human, and they get up and have drama at home that they carry to work with them. But is there a way we could hold them accountable, just like a juror has to sign off and saying, I can be impartial in this trial and make the best decision as a juror? Can we get police officers to be impartial and make decisions based on the situation, not what they have been through, not what they saw, not who you know what I'm saying? Can that happen? That was my initial question when we first started. And I think if that can happen in whatever way, we'll be better off. Things will be better off between.
I'm glad you brought that up again. I wanted to respond to that. It should be mandatory when you come in. It should be something that recruitment looks for in a candidate at the interview stage. Very difficult to assess, and you'll never get it out of decision making when it comes to law enforcement practices. It's virtually impossible to take away a person's life experience from their decision making process, especially when under stress, especially when you could get hurt, especially when you could possibly hurt someone. Mm-hmm. It's totally impossible to take that aspect totally out of it. What you have to learn how to do individually as a police officer is learn how to cope with those traumas and experiences that you've had in your life, and learn how to maneuver through your career and not use them as excuses for doing certain things that become detrimental to other people in your community. You got to reel it in. So you can't go to work. You can't go to work with a chip on your shoulder because you had a bad day.
Correct.
We all do it. It's natural. It's human. But you got to reel it in to some extent and minimize it as best you can, based on your mental state and where your mental state is, right? Because it's all mental state. And Ibn's right. We talked about this last time. The need for mental health is critical, right? And I don't want to let leadership off the hook either, right? Because it's incumbent upon leadership within these police departments to notice when somebody's had enough. Right. There was a video with one of my brothers from my department was all over the internet because he had it with a motorist, and he lit him up on the highway. You've probably all seen this video. If you haven't, if you look that video up, I'm sure you'll see it. It's still floating around out there. He had enough. Now I'll tell you this: I got no problem with everything he said, with anything he said to that driver. He was absolutely correct. And I tell you what, I've been him on several occasions out there. Because there are people like that operator of that vehicle that day who drive in a manner that's totally detrimental to public safety, right? I got no problem with him. Now, his bosses, after seeing that, should recognize we got to get him off the road. He's had enough.
Or he just, needs something else. Like, is there enough built-in systems to support our officers? Like on a consistent basis, not just when a trauma happens, but every day. Well, every day you have extraordinarily stressful jobs.
Well, I know. Yeah, we had EAP. Everybody's got EAP, right? But we also had a mentoring program. We still do have a mentoring program when you could go and talk to another trooper about incidents. You get assigned a mentor who you can, bounce ideas off of, in addition to whatever your support system is, right? But again, it's all voluntary. None of this stuff is mandatory, except for certain scenarios that certain traumatic experiences you go through, like maybe a shooting or something. My first traumatic experience was investigating the death of an 8-month-old baby.
Oh my God.
I went to the autopsy, got back to the troop. 2 weeks later, my boss walks up to me and said, "Hey, I was supposed to ask if you wanted to go see EAP." I said, "Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you." I wasn't fine because I had a 9-month-old baby at home myself, right? I wasn't fine, but in my mind, I could handle it. I had seen a lot more than that, right? I could handle it, and I was able to process it and cope with that. Certain people can cope with these things. Certain times you can't. Certain tragedies you can cope with. Certain other ones you need help with, right? So leadership has to be able to recognize their subordinates, their team, and see and pay attention to the signs and like, you know what, come into my office and have a seat. Let's talk about some things, or why don't you stay in the troop today and knock out some paper, get them off the road for a day or two, or even if it's bad enough, get them transferred out someplace where they're not stressed out. I know my department was pretty good at doing that. Even when some people didn't want to be transferred, they got transferred anyway. Because those particular leaders saw something in these officers that they didn't like, and they need to remove them from that situation. And a lot of times it worked out for that troop is in his best interest, his or her best interest, and sometimes it did. You just never know.
Right.
So your question it's a tough question. You hope that people applying come in with the best of intentions, with that compassionate attitude, with that enthusiastic attitude of wanting to help their community. But again, that in itself can go from the best intentions to the worst intentions. I've seen cops come in, hard charges, professional, ready to do work in the community, and by their 10th year, sometimes less, totally different attitude, totally disgruntled. All they're trying to do is get to the end and get to the retirement,
Right.
so they can ride off into the sunset, and that's it. And for the majority of their careers, sometimes it's a bad attitude, and that bad attitude permeates among the weaker-minded within their units. So
I have one more question about lights and sirens, please. And that is, I hear all the different places it is, but it's not in Massachusetts, not in Boston.
No, we're not.
How come?
Personnel. We have a personnel issue. And what I mean by that is, I still have my hands around Lights and Sirens International, and I'm able to control a lot of the content and everything that is there. This is like now this is my baby. I'm not going to say it is my baby, and I am keeping it within the control and the confines of the area which I know how to deal with.
Okay.
I do have a network in Massachusetts, and I do work with a brother that's a homicide detective in Milton, Mass. And he also is in the Dominican Republic and has participated in Lights and Sirens International. But right now, I'm just trying to get our programming together, trying to have it be sustainable so that now we can move forward and start bringing it to other locations so that we can start this process.
I want you here with us. Well, when you're ready, I certainly know some police chiefs I'd like to introduce you to. So,
well, I would love to meet them and talk with them and share with them. I do reach out to the New England Police and Chiefs Association, so I'm supportive of that. And I do get the information out there to them. But again, as Lindsay and Eric have mentioned, we are talking about folks that don't look like us. Okay. So, if the concept and the idea, and goes back to ego, if it's not coming from you, then it's not worthy. But then you might hear something maybe 9 months, a year, 3 years down the road, and then you'd be like, yo, I was doing something like that, and now it's been taken away from me. So that's why I say that I'm trying to keep my arms around Lights and Sirens International. And with me even being in the Dominican Republic, it is now, I've gotten exposure, and that exposure is now leading to more folks reaching out and asking for support and assistance. And so we're getting there. We're getting there, but slow and steady.
That's awesome.
Okay.
We'll give you
I love having you guys on.
Yeah.
And the time just goes by, and I have like a million questions, and I never get them all asked.
I do want to add from a mother's perspective, and this is probably, this is what the show is all about. I've heard Lynn say several times, dignity, respect, and integrity. And as mothers, if we can raise our children to value those skills, morals, intangibles, whatever you want to call them, we will raise better police officers, CEOs, banker, whatever our kids choose to become. I think the underlying theme is we as mothers do have a responsibility and an opportunity to, make our children very respectful, dignified, and have a whole lot of integrity about anything they choose to do in life. And I think if we don't do that with them at a young age, we fail them, in helping them be better citizens and better people within the community, no matter what their, whatever their career choice is. So I took that with me, Linz, and I'm going to make sure I want our mothers out there to hear what you stress and what you believe makes better policing. And those three things are huge. And, we have an opportunity to change the narrative as mothers raising our children.
I appreciate that. Real quick before we go, I can't take credit for that. I didn't come up with that strategy. I learned it in Marine Corps. The Marine Corps has a set of leadership traits and principles that they teach young Marines going into the Marine Corps. I taught my explorers that. They had to test on those leadership traits and principles before they became an explorer. I even tested my daughters. And as a matter of fact, my youngest daughter, she's 13 now. She took it 2 months ago. She passed it. I test on those things. It's public information. If you go on the Marine Corps website and Google Marine Corps leadership traits and principles, that is pretty much my Bible. That is how I try to walk throughout my career and in my personal life as well. Although my personal life is a little more liberal, right? But professionally, I walk that line, and I try to demonstrate those qualities while serving the community that I was in.
Wonderful.
And mine is basically just I respect you, you respect me. I learned that when I was down in Memphis, Tennessee, with the Memphis Police Department, and I was in a school, and the principal announced in the auditorium, "I respect you," and the shout was, "You respect me." And I feel that is just so important, because as we respect each other, you gain respect.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Can we put something on our, can you give us something to put on our website about, the Lights and Siren and how people can get involved or donate?
Absolutely. So it's just like it sounds, www.lightsandsirensinternational.org. We also are on Facebook. We have a YouTube page similar to you guys,
good.
As well as Instagram. We are looking for support and donations to help us to continue our programming so that we can finally get to Massachusetts, and we can get into the Connecticut's, and we can get into the Pennsylvania's, and we can start going across the country and start implementing what we're doing, because this is really important work. And I just want to make sure that I do my part, because this is bigger than me. This is bigger than all of us.
This is bigger than all of us.
And
that's why we're doing
it. But the fact that we're all coming together and doing this, I really appreciate this. But ladies, I really thank you so much for coming on again. I know we didn't get through a lot of the questions.
That's okay. We'll have you back.
Donna will have you back. Donna, already scheduled.
I might have some surprises for you guys next time, and get that perspective from female law enforcement officers as well. Right. But again, that gag, or I have to wait for my folks to retire so that now they have that freedom to be able to speak, so that they, don't have that gag order that's in place.
See, I want to talk about that.
Thank you very much for joining our call again. It's been a pleasure. So much information shared and perspectives shared, and I think it really helped our audience kind of, realize what they need to do to help, policing, help our communities build better relationships. And I think that's what we all want at the end of the day. We need you guys as mothers, and you guys need us. So we all have to do our part.
That's right.
Thank you very much again for having me on.
And Lindsay, one more thing: is the Explorer program still alive around the country?
It is. It's underwritten by the Boy Scouts of America. So if you go to any Boy Scouts of America chapter and you ask them about their Explore program, it's just a law enforcement segment of their program. It's run by local and state law enforcement departments if they want to establish it.
All right, that means it's time to go. That means it's time to go. We got the dog barking. It's tired. It's dinner time. Thank you so much, everyone.
Have a good night.
All right, take care.